The following program was produced by an independent community producer. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the ECAT staff or board of directors.
All right, let me just give you the background to why I'm here. My major in college was Middle Eastern history at Michigan. And about 5 years ago, Bridgewater State University, in conjunction with the town, set up some courses that were simply designed for informational purposes. No credit, no homework, no tests. You don't have to come if you don't want to. Some were online, some were in person. And I got involved in that. And last fall, I did a course, introductory course to the Middle East. It was 6 weeks, hour each. Just, very quick going over the main points. And I did get into the Israeli-Palestinian issues. And then when October 7th happened, I thought to myself, well, maybe I should take it on the road. So I did a presentation in the Bridgewater Library, and then I've done more, East Bridgewater, West Bridgewater, Canton last night, Fall River, and it's a number of places. And simply to give you an idea of the background, I'm not going beyond October 7th, actually. I'm just coming up to it, just to give a background to what happened, or what preceded October 7th.
Beginning one, like at what point do you start?
I'm going to start with the beginning of Christianity. Believe me, it won't be that long. I mean, we'll get this done. Okay. First thing I want you to understand is, I'm sure you do already, that there are strong feelings on each side of the dispute right now. Right or wrong, they're there. When people think something, whether you think they're right or wrong, it's there. And just give you some of those feelings. First two are from Hamas people, and the next two are Israelis. Next two are Israelis. I just throw that out to you. And if you do a Google on the feelings of each side, you'll find things like this. I'm just telling you it's there. Feelings are hard among the, how should I say, the right wing of each side. Well, I just want to give you the background to what happened, to where we are today. And the beginning is really the beginning of Christianity. What I'm going to talk about, just briefly, is anti-Semitism, because anti-Semitism is the basis for where we are right now. Come on in. It's sometimes referred to as the longest hate, anti-Semitism. And it starts with early Christianity. The fact that when Christianity evolved, Jews were not Christians, therefore they were not equal to them. This is St. Augustine in the 5th century, CE. CE meaning Common Era. We don't use BC and AD anymore. In the 12th century, you probably are aware of the Crusade. The Europeans went to claim the Holy Land back from the Muslims, and on the first Crusade, they attacked Jews in the Rhineland and massacred them. in the Black Death in the 14th century, where roughly a quarter to a third of Europeans were killed because of the disease. Some people blame the Jews, and the Jews were killed because of that. Martin Luther, the beginning of Protestantism, expected the Jews to convert to Protestantism. They did not. What came about also with this concept of blood libel, I don't know if you ever heard this before, that Jews were accused of murdering Christian children to use their blood for various rituals. And this was mainly in Eastern Europe, but it was common in the 19th century and even into the 20th century. In the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, there were pogroms in Russia. Yeah, and well, when the Russian Empire under the Tsars expanded westward, which is now Eastern Europe, they encompass a lot of Jews living in the area. And there's a lot of anti-Semitism against Jews, and there were killings of Jews in villages. Nathan Rothschild, the Rothschild family, extremely wealthy European Jews, they were blamed for a number of things in the 19th century. It's a cartoon of the idea of the Rothschilds controlling economies of nations, that they know how, they move money around and the Jews control everything. Well, you know, if you see the news today, it's not uncommon today. George Soros is Jewish, very wealthy, he gives to liberal causes, and he's blamed for a lot of things by the right wing today. What I'm trying to get across to you here is the fact that anti-Semitism has existed and does exist is a basis for what we're talking about in terms of the issues today. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion was written in the Tsarist Russia in the beginning of the 20th century. Come on in. And it was a document, an anti-Semitic document, essentially blaming Jews for trying to control the world. And what it says is this. This is from the Protocols. And some of those things, some of these concepts I'm giving you here, you probably heard before other people saying this, that Jews control things. And this goes back to the time of the late 19th century, early 20th century. And the Protocols, even though they've been they've been shown to be totally forged, no basis behind them. Some people still believe them today. You've heard them before?
What?
You've heard of the Protocols before?
Many times.
Okay, okay.
They've all been debunked.
They've all been debunked, but just as it's not any secret.
People still believe it.
Exactly. I mean, it's no secret to all of us that if you tell somebody that the lights are on, they'll say, no, it's off. And whatever people believe is what counts. Dreyfus Affair, a French officer was accused of, he was Jewish, of giving secrets to the enemy. He was tried, convicted, eventually exonerated. But it was a case, he was Jewish and it was anti-Semitic. In the United States, Jews were accused of controlling things. This is early 20th century American cartoon of a Jew controlling people. You've heard, I don't know if you ever heard of Henry Ford. He was an extreme anti-Semitic. He had a newspaper arguing that Jews were wrong. Father Coughlin, I don't know if you ever heard of him, a priest in Detroit. And this is before the Holocaust. He was very popular.
It was the beginning of the Holocaust, but before we knew about it.
No, the Holocaust was German. I mean,
It was in Germany, but I meant that it was before we in the States knew about it.
Oh, you mean it was going on before we knew? That's arguable today.
It's kind of,
Yeah,
but some of its time overlapped.
yeah. Well, he wrote this here. He said this prior to World War II. In other words, Hitler was bringing about the trying to go after the Jews in the 1930s. What came out of what anti-Semitism brought about was this idea that Jews, among certain Jews, that Jews simply cannot exist in countries, Christian nations or whatever, that they need a home of their own. And the idea was to get a home that they could call their home, called Zionism. And it really starts with this man, Theodor Herzl, in the late 19th century. He argues, he brings up the term Zionism, that they need a home. They have to get out of these countries in Europe and establish a country where they can exist and live in peace. And the idea is to do it in Palestine. Why Palestine? Of course, because Palestine is where, this shows up on the screen, Palestine is the old Holy Land. Now, the British, when Herzl came up with this, the British said, well, how about going to Africa, a place in Africa? They said, no, we don't want Africa. We want Palestine. And so he starts pushing, there are certain people in the world, male and female, that devote their life to things. They try, they work hard, 10 years, nothing happens. Herzl was the type of person who just didn't give up. He kept pushing to get the British in particular to allow a homeland in the Holy Land. First Zionist conference in Switzerland in 1897. Organization, they collect money. They start lobbying different governments in Europe to pressure them to establish a homeland. The first Aliyah, it's called, where some Jews start moving to Palestine in groups at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. So you have this movement, this idea of establishing a homeland again in Palestine. I just mentioned earlier that there have been pogroms in Russia on and off for decades. This one in 1903, which is now Moldavia today, seemed to catch the world's attention. And there was sympathy for Jews. This cartoon, if you look at it, do you recognize anybody in that cartoon?
The Tsar.
No. Well, yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. Next to the Tsar is, come on, somebody.
Was that Roosevelt?
That's right, very good. It's Theodore Roosevelt. It's an American cartoon, so I'm just trying to show you there was sympathy for the Jews. Second Aliyah in the early 20th century. This is hundreds of Jews going to the Holy Land, buying land, establishing houses and agricultural fields. Then World War I takes place. Now, my feeling is World War I is the critical event of the 20th century. I would argue if World War I did not happen, you probably would not have communism, and you certainly wouldn't have had Hitler. World War I changed the world, literally, and it also changed Zionism. Third Aliyah, late teens. Now, what happens is the British and French are fighting the Germans and the Turks. And it's a bloody war. World War I kills roughly 20 million people. It's this trench warfare. It's horrendous, only to be topped by World War II. The British want help. The Middle East is controlled by the Turks, the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire is failing, but the Turks still control it. And the British want help, and so they go to the Arabs in what is now Saudi Arabia, and they say, look you help us, you revolt against the Turks, because the British want the Turks out of the war, and we'll help you establish a homeland. 1916, the Arabs do revolt. Have you ever heard of Lawrence Arabia? Okay, so they go to the Arabs and say, we'll help you. They also, secretly, the British and the French come to an agreement. And what they do is to say, well, this is a period of imperialism. After the war, after the Turks are defeated and after the Germans are defeated, we'll divide up the Middle East for ourselves. Wait a minute. And this is what the Sykes-Picot Agreement is. In other words, they simply divide, it doesn't come out this way, but they decide to divide the Middle East up into their own spheres of influence, where the French control, British control, Russia control, and so forth. And then in 1917, they issue the Balfour Document. And what they say to the Jewish leadership is, you help us, and we'll help you get a homeland in Palestine. And what they want is, they want the Jews of the United States in particular to lobby the American government for money and for eventually, and you understand the United States doesn't enter the war till later. So they want help. So you have the British making three promises here. The Arabs, the Jews, and with the French. And you can understand that they don't jive with each other at all. The war goes on. The British take Palestine. And after the Paris Peace Treaty in 1919, they settle the issue with Germany. They then have to work about what about the rest of the area as the Middle East. And this is in San Remo in Italy. They have a conference on, come on in. And this is where they talk about the Middle East. And what they do, this is an important map. This is how the Middle East is divided up by the British, essentially the British and the French. They're the ones that are pushing for things. And
called Palestine before the British took it over as a...
I'm sorry? It was Turkish.
It was Turkish.
Yeah.
It was not called Palestine, right?
Yeah, no, it was referred to as Palestine, but there were Arabs there, but I mean, it was controlled by the Turks. The Turks controlled the entire
I'm just
area.
saying it didn't have that name, though.
Palestine came after.
Right.
Palestine is an area, it's not it was a country.
That's
No.
what I was gonna say.
The thing I want you to understand here is this. If you notice the lines between these areas, they're just straight lines. In other words, the British and French did was simply to draw lines and saying, okay, this is our area, this is your area, and so forth. They didn't consider the ethnicity of each area. They're simply, as I said before, this is the high point of imperialism. They're looking for areas that they want, that they will help you. Understand the British are the imperialistic power in the world at this time. And their main jewel is India. If you look at a map of the world, if you're going to get to India, if you go around Africa, that's a long ways. If you go through the Suez Canal, it almost half the time, distance. The Suez Canal being right here, well, that doesn't show up on the screen, you can see how Palestine is important to controlling the canal. During World War I, the Turks tried to take the canal, and they were defeated. So Palestine's important. My only point is that the British consider this area important. If you heard of Lawrence of Arabia, he drew a map of the Middle East, which he argued would be better in a sense because it's more on ethnic grounds. And he was totally ignored. No, nobody. I mean, I'm just a nice guy, but go home, you know. Okay, this is the British mandate. The term mandate was used this time. The idea was powerful countries like Britain, France, the United States, and so forth would help smaller nations become workable nations, you know, government and so forth. In reality, mandates were simply imperialistic powers controlling smaller nations. And so the British had the mandate for Palestine. And they divided it up into a where Jews were allowed to settle. In other words, the Jews could have settled along it's the orange area there. Jews could settle there. And the area beyond the Jordan River, no, they couldn't. Immediately, you have problems.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Before they said, okay, Jews can live over here and Jews can't live over here, were they kind of living in harmony altogether?
Well, it depends on what you call harmony. I mean, yes, they were. Yeah. I mean, The Jews that were coming in, which I was talking about before you came, would try to buy land, and they would settle in the area. Now, this Jews coming in was started late 19th century, early 20th century. So Jews were there.
Post World War I?
Yeah, there were Jews there before World War I.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The problem is that the Arabs don't want them. And so right from the beginning, and what I'm trying to get across to you is we're in a serious dispute in 2024. Here's the beginning. I mean, if you want to blame anybody, maybe it's not fair, you can almost blame the British indirectly anyway for the way they set this up. But the Arabs riot immediately in 1920, 1921 over the fact that Jews are there. The Jews set up their own defense groups to defend themselves against the Arabs. 1920, the Haganah is formed. The British now realize they've got a problem. Now they say, well, okay, we didn't really mean that the Jews can have a country. They can have a homeland, but not necessarily a country. So they've got a tiger by the tail, in a sense, that they realize right away. Fourth Aliyah, more Jews come in. The British are, remember, this is British control. They're allowing some Jews to come into the area on a regular basis. 1929, there's rioting, serious rioting in Jerusalem by the Arabs. British report. Yep.
So, as you keep saying that the Jews are coming and they're coming,
Right.
you haven't said that they were there prior to that.
And they were.
There were
Jews there for 3,000 years.
there were Jews, sure, there were in the
You
area.
know, they were massacred and annihilated over and over and over, so that there were so few left that I guess it didn't count, but
They weren't.
they were
always
there.
had some.
They've been there.
There were Jews there, but when I'm saying coming in, we're talking about thousands coming in over a period of years. Okay, another defense force, the Irgun, is formed in 1931. Just to show, Menachem Begin was part of it, and he became prime minister in 1977.
What was the novel that inspired his Zionist movement?
Novel?
There was a novel that he read that.
I don't know.
The State of Israel. Yeah,
You
it's
mean
very
about-
interesting.
That inspired it or who told
That
the
inspired
story of
him.
it?
That inspired Begin.
Begin? I don't know. I don't know
You're
that.
talking about a novel that told the story of it?
Well,
or
this is before the State of Israel existed. This was an author that
Okay,
Yeah.
then
wrote a
there would
story
be-
about a Zionist.
Would have been,
Well, I mentioned Herzl before you came in, Theodor Herzl, who was the originator of Zionism.
of
Yeah.
modern Zionism.
Yeah, modern Zionism, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I honestly don't
He
know.
wrote a book that.
Fifth Aliyah, 1929, 39 more Jews come in. And now you realize, by the 1930s, Hitler's in power in Germany. So there's a greater effort to get out of Europe. The late 1930s is the major uprising. The British brought in troops to suppress the Arab revolts. It was on and off for a few years, and they had a problem, obviously. And so what the British say in the Peel Commission in 1937, and this is, you probably can't see that map, but basically now they're saying maybe we have to divide these people into two different areas. The map is, I mean, the way they set it up is not very workable, but now they're talking about dividing Arabs and Jews, not necessarily letting them live together, but dividing them. The British still are in control. They're running the place. This is interesting. I didn't know this until I did a little more research on this. Obviously you know about the Nazis and Hitler and the Jews. But in 1933, when Hitler becomes the power, and there's already strong anti-Semitism, Jews want to get out. And the Nazis allow, early in the 1930s anyway, to get out. If they sell their goods in Germany, they use the funds to leave. And this was an agreement where some Jews did get out of Germany prior to the Holocaust. And then, of course, Hitler. I don't need to go into Hitler. I mean, if you want to talk about an anti-Semite, he's the epitome of an anti-Semite. I mean, to think that the world, his army is being defeated in 1949, and it needs all the material that Germany can produce, so forth. And what does he do? He puts it towards killing Jews. World War II, Holocaust.
Mass graves.
Mass graves, yep. And then the gas chambers, of course.
Would it be considered genocide at this point, or is this just mass atrocity?
The word genocide.
I know it didn't exist yet.
The word genocide didn't exist at that time. Yeah. Well, yeah, you have to.
UN and stuff.
Well, I don't want to jump ahead,
Big
but
numbers.
I mean just as a, maybe we can talk about it after, but no, I'm just saying if you look at the Genocide Convention of the United Nations, it's pretty clear about what constitutes genocide, and you can't. I think sometimes the word is used too freely. I mean, for a lot of causes, but
Right.
it's pretty clear what genocide is. A couple of quick stories. The Jews are trying to get out of Europe. And there are a couple instances where this ship was sunk, that was bringing Jewish refugees to Palestine. The British didn't want them to come in. They're trying to limit people coming in. And the Jews plant an explosive device in the ship with the idea of damaging the ship so that the British will allow them in. It sinks and hundreds die because of that. Another case, another ship in 1942 in the Black Sea with refugees. A Russian submarine torpedoes it and it sinks with people.
The first ship that you showed us, the Patria?
Yep,
Now, who was on that ship? The refugees?
some refugees, yeah.
The refugees were on the ship, yet they believed the Jews.
Well, they did. We know they did. Well, they didn't intend to sink it. They intended just to damage it, so it would be damaged and that the ship would have to be brought into port. But the explosive device they set actually sunk this.
That's why I was trying to understand it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
They Jews that were trying to come in, if the British got them, they would put them in Cyprus in an internment camp. The Exodus, the British, yeah, the British. The Exodus, you probably heard of before. Oh, I mean, saw the movie. You're too young to see it.
Maybe on Netflix.
With Paul Newman, yeah. Okay, now, as the war is coming to an end, the British still control Palestine, and they're not sure what to do. Lord Morgan is one of the major leaders of the British in Palestine. He is anti-Jewish settlement. He's assassinated by a Jew. In other words, the Jews in Palestine are not happy with the British. They want them out. And he's assassinated. And this begins I don't want to use the word trend, but assassinations take place now on both sides. King David Hotel, which was the center of the British government in Palestine, is exploded. Jewish partisans planted explosive devices in it and brought it down. And again, they're going after the British. They want the British out. Stern Gang. You can see this graph, immigration to Palestine. You can see how it increases in the 1930s. It keeps going up between that period because of the Holocaust. And you can see...
Where are your facts coming from? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
Your facts, where are they coming from?
This is Al Jazeera. It's the Qatar, I believe.
The
Yeah.
Arab news.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's from the government of Qatar, or I think it's Qatar or one of the other Arab states. The population of Palestine increases. You can see by the black area in the 40s. And again, this is because of Hitler. Then in 1947, the critical event takes place. The British, after 40 years, say, we're out of here. We can't handle this. And they turn the whole thing over to the United Nations. The United Nations, as you know, is formed after World War II. And the United Nations decides we're going to partition Palestine. We're going to divide it between the Jews and the Arabs. And that's the only way to settle this issue. And immediately, the Jews proclaim the State of Israel. It's formed on May 14th, 1948. So the State of Israel becomes a state. And this is what it looks like. Now, you can make your own opinion here, but you can see that the left map shows the Jewish settlements in, I guess it's orange, I'm partly colorblind. The right map shows the United Nations argument for how you divide it. So you have the yellow area would be the Arab state. The orange area, or red, whatever it is, would be the Jewish state.
Orange.
Now, if you look at that in terms of countries, you can see that's an issue, that you have boundaries like that for two countries. What they're doing is simply saying that where the majority of Jews are will become part of Israel, where the majority of Arabs are will become part of an Arab state. It's not really that workable. The United Nations, the United States immediately recognizes Israel as a state. Do you understand the difference between a state and nation? As an aside, nation is referring to a group of people that have similar characteristics. I can give you an example. The Wampanoag Indians would be considered a nation, but they're not a state. In other words, a state that has boundaries, government, and so forth. So we recognize Israel as a state. Truman is president of the United States. By the way, he would probably be considered an anti-Semite today, but for political reasons, he recognizes Israel. And immediately you have a war. The Arab states around the new state of Israel attack. First Arab-Israeli War, 1948 to 1949. It's a short war, and the Arabs win. The Israelis win. So what happens is, remember that map on the left is the one I showed you before.
Yeah.
It changes now because the Israelis conquer much of the area. They take over much of what was considered a part of the Arab state.
How were they able to do that?
Their army.
Where did they develop an army?
They already had self-defense forces, and they immediately formed an army. And the question that a lot of people would say is where they get the weapons. Remember, this is after World War II. There were a ton of leftover weapons from World War II. They got mainly from Eastern Europe and so forth. That's just an aside. If you look at the news today and you read about wars going on around the world and you say, whoa, where did they get all those weapons? The world is full of weaponry. You realize that. I mean, any country in the world, you can get essentially anything you want. And just another aside, the biggest weapons producer in the world is
China?
the United States.
Oh, okay.
If you take the 7 countries, the first 7 countries that produce weapons, we produce more than the 6 under us combined.
Including Iran?
Oh, there is nobody that equals the United States.
No, but I thought Iran was a close second.
No. Nobody is. Okay, so this war is a war that the issues of this war carry forward to today. Let me explain. First of all, Jerusalem is divided between the new state of Israel and the country of Jordan. And Jerusalem is an important issue. Why, you can guess.
That's the religious capital of 3 religions.
That's right. It's a holy city for Christians, for Muslims, and for Jews. Another assassination, the king of Jordan, who is a moderate, and he does want to work out something with the Israelis, he's assassinated by an Arab. The assassinations take place by people of their own side.
To make it look like it was the other.
It wasn't, no. That's right. They didn't want, you get rid of people if they don't agree with you. And that, maybe not assassinations, but you should understand that that happens all the time. Deir Yassin is still mentioned today. It's an Arab village during the war in 1948 where over 100 civilians were killed. And it's controversial today. The Arabs say they were murdered. That wasn't during fighting. And what came out of this was that the Arabs fled. And this, the Nakba, is still, that term is still here. You'll hear it today in the news. And that is that the Jews during this war forced the Arabs out. The Arabs will argue the Jews said we didn't do that. I'm not going to take sides. I'm just saying that is an issue today, that the Arabs were forced, the Palestinian Arabs were forced to leave because of this war. I didn't realize until I started doing more research on this that the United Nations, you notice that the signs on the left up there say Nakba, accepted the Nakba in April 2023. In 1950, the Israelis say any Jew has the right to come to Israel, that Israel is open to all Jews. The Arabs say, we can't have peace with you unless you allow the refugees to come back. That is still said today. You'll still hear that today. No peace without return. That's not an old term. Yep.
Because I was born in 48, and I moved to a new town when I was like 8 years old, so 1956. And I went to school with 3 different girls whose parents came from Arab countries. They were Jewish. They were forced out because nobody talks about that the Jews who lived in the Arab lands were also forced out at the same time of the Nakba. It wasn't, actually even before the Nakba.
Mm-hmm.
But people don't talk about that, and that's also important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure.
I mean, I'm not a history professor like,
No, I'm not.
you are.
Yeah.
And I just wondered why that's never mentioned.
I can't answer. I'm just telling you what I'm trying to tell you, give you what has been prevalent in terms of the argument and the.
But it's part of the facts.
Right, it's omitted. So I
When you
graduated in
make facts,
86.
Well-
you're changing the narrative.
I graduated from high school in 86. And
Right.
11 and Iraqi and Syrian Jewish women, my friends were Jewish, Christian, and Muslim straight through my career. And yeah, I mean, it's all sad. The whole thing is sad, how
It's sad
hatred
for
brews
people
on
on
different
civil-
Let me get through this, then we can come back, okay? Anyway, the United Nations Resolution 1974 allows it says that the Palestinians have the right to come back. Palestinians today, 2 million in Gaza, roughly 2 million in Israel, West Bank, and the Arab countries, of course, and then other countries. Land acquisition law of 1953, the Israelis say the land that has been left by the Arabs we can take. And then you have the terror attacks beginning against Israel in the 50s. The Cold War changes things somewhat. You now have the United States is afraid of communism and afraid of being attacked by the Russians. Nasser, Abdul Nasser takes control of Egypt during this time. And he is shifting sort of towards Russia instead of the United States. And he nationalizes the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal was built by the French, controlled by the British. Now he takes control of Egypt and he says that the Suez Canal is ours. The British go bonkers, of course, because the canal is extremely important to them. And what happens is a second war, the Arab-Israeli War of 1956, where the Israelis attack Egypt with the help of the British and the French. And this is an interesting war in that it's stopped, ironically, by the United States and the Soviet Union. Eisenhower is president. He is upset with the British for not letting him know that they were going to attack. And we pressure the British to pull back. So this war is won by the Israelis again, but they were forced to withdraw. And now Nasser becomes a hero among the Arabs. United Nations peacekeepers for the first time come in to try to separate the group. 67, another war. This one is critical. You have a war where the Israelis attack. There are various reasons I'm not going to go into.
The Israelis were attacked, they didn't initiate.
Well, it was...
You're the only person I've ever heard say that
they considered that there was going to be an invasion. You did talk about 73, they were attacked by the Arabs. The Yom Kippur War, which...
67 they were too.
Yeah. Well, anyway, the Golan Heights, Gaza, West Bank, East Jerusalem, the Sinai Peninsula are all taken by the Israelis. That's critical, because these areas were disputed. Now it's under Israeli control. So the major change in terms of the map takes place now in 67. Okay. You know, we talk about Gaza. It's here that the Israelis take control of it. And this is the map that shows the difference of the map. If you can see the change here. Okay, well, this is an aside. The Israelis attacked the USS Liberty. It's a spy ship. On our part, we're trying to find out what's going on. I just threw this in. The diplomatic issue was settled.
This was kind of a big thing. There was,
Yeah, I know.
6 Americans that were killed,
Yeah,
roughly,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And a bunch of people that were affected by it. And the families.
But that's right. How should I just say this? By Eisenhower's time, you see a shift in the United States policy to supporting Israel. It does, with Truman, it's there. Eisenhower somewhat, Kennedy somewhat, and then you see the shift to really supporting Israel. And it's one of those things where you didn't make a big deal out of it, even though you may argue that it was, you know. Yasser Arafat becomes head of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. You have more terrorist attacks. On the other side, you have the right wing in Israel saying the West Bank is ours and we should settle it. The West Bank is that area between the Jordan River and what is, you know, is Israel. And it's considered then, after the 67 war, and today is occupied territory. It is not part of Israel. But the issue is, what about the settlements? Who settled, who should settle? Now the Palestinians are there, and the Israelis have been going in also. This group said it's ours and we have the right to settle it. And so that becomes an issue. It's a major issue right now. Control of Jerusalem. As we just said, Jerusalem is a holy city to 3 major religions. Any little thing can become a major thing. I'll give you a little, what I consider to be humorous. The church, their Holy Sepulchre, okay, is obviously, in terms of Christians, extremely important. And there are various Christian sects there. I'm Armenian, so the Armenians have a little portion of it. Do you know who controls the key to the door to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre? It's passed down in an Arab family. Now you say, why an Arab? Well,
Christian Arab.
No. Well, yeah, you're Christian Arab, you're right. But why an Arab family? Well, if you have these different sects, they're afraid that one's going to lock out somebody else. So they leave it up to the Arabs. Israel, what happens after 67, the Jews, the Israelis say Jerusalem is our capital city now. I won't go into this, but the Jordan River is an issue. It's not a major issue right now. Who controls the Jordan River? It controls the water to both countries. Hussein of Jordan, moderate. Some of the Arab terrorists, what was referred to as the Black September, they try to overthrow him. This is Arab against Arab. He uses the Jordanian army. He goes after them, and he literally throws them out of Jordan, and they go to Lebanon. Black September, you may have heard of before. Terrorist organization. You definitely heard of the 1972 Olympics. The Yom Kippur War, the last major war, where the Arabs do attack the Israelis. They come close to beating them. The United States ships, Nixon is in president now, he ships heavy weaponry to the Israelis and helps, and the Arabs are defeated. You remember the gas embargo of 1973?
Waiting in line for gas.
That's right.
On odd or even days.
That's right, I forgot about that. Yeah, you're not supposed to go more than 55 miles an hour on the highway either. Yeah, right. In 1978, there's an attempt by Carter to bring about some sort of settlement. Gets them together at Camp David outside of Washington. And there is some progress here. Camp David Accords, Israel agrees to withdraw from the Sinai. Egypt will get the Sinai back. Israeli shipping will have free passage through the Suez Canal, and so on. I don't want to go into detail. We don't have time. But the point is, there is movement now to try to settle this. And then Sadat is assassinated. Again, I'm trying to get across, showing you the group, the people that look towards some sort of compromise are gone after by the right wings, the left wings of each side. The Israelis develop nuclear weapons. Jerusalem Law of 1980, where the Israelis say Jerusalem is our capital, it's ours. In 1982, the Israelis attacked the Iraqi.
Wasn't that Begin was also assassinated?
I'm sorry?
Wasn't Begin also assassinated?
I'm getting there. Yeah.
What happened in the 80s?
Israel attacks what they consider Iraq a threat, and they think that Iraq is developing a nuclear weapon, so they attack the site. Lebanon becomes an issue. Lebanon, I don't have time to go into. Its government is a mess. They have so many different constitutional people, and they have problems all the time. But you have a civil war develop at this time, and you have the Black September now in Lebanon using terrorist attacks on Israel. So Lebanon becomes an issue here. And Hezbollah, you've heard of, you hear in the news right now, is formed at this time. And then the Israelis invade Lebanon. If they are attacked, if they get weaponry, missiles and so forth on them, or they get terrorist attacks, they attack. And they invade Lebanon in 78, 82. They fully withdraw in 72, in 2000. And then you have what is called the Intifada, which is a spontaneous uprising of the Arabs in Palestine. And for sometimes little things set them off. And it starts in 87, it goes on and off for a few years, where they come out in mass in protest of their conditions, everything going on.
What are the conditions?
Well, it could be the Israelis are controlling too much, and they can't go certain places. They have to use passes to get places. They can't do.
Did they already have the checkpoints?
They start having checkpoints at this time. Yeah.
They own certain property or get permits.
You mean owning property?
Yeah, like I heard that they can't own certain property in certain places, or
Yeah, that's true today. Yeah.
they need certain permits.
Right.
I mean, basically, they're living under apartheid.
See, look at. I don't want to get into there are roughly 2 million Arabs today in Israel. And they are citizens of Israel. You'll also read, some will argue they're not equal citizens. They don't have the same rights as the Jews in Israel. That's all. Anyway, you have the intifada. I love the picture on the left. It's mainly women, by the way, that are upset. I like that picture because the guy is pointing, the soldier's pointing a gun at them. Look at that woman's face in the middle. She's saying, I'm not afraid of you, buddy.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. Hamas is formed in Gaza. Clinton tries to work out a deal in 1993 between Rabin and Yasser Arafat, and they do come up with some agreement. The question is, how do you interpret the agreement? For instance, at the bottom it says, agreed on interim self-government for the Palestinians. What that says and what was interpreted are two different things. The Yasser Arafat and the Palestinians thought, well, it means that we can have our own government. And the Israelis say, not really, we didn't really mean that. Rabin, who is the compromiser. And he's assassinated by a Jew.
By a right-wing extremist.
And when Clinton's leaving office in 2000, he tries one more time, and nothing comes out of this. But he makes an attempt to bring people together. That's the last time you see any major movement. Just an example of how little things in Palestine can cause big problems. Ariel Sharon, Prime Minister, goes to the Temple Mount. It's a religious site for everybody, as I said before, and he's guarded by hundreds of guards. And you have the Arabs are upset, and you have the second intifada because of that. Gaza, of course, refugee camp. Terrorist attacks on the Israelis, ongoing. Second Lebanon War, 2006. Just as an aside here again, how much time do we have? I'm almost done, but we okay on time?
4 minutes.
What time, I want to leave some time for,
7:26.
okay. All right, I won't give you the aside. West Bank settlements continue. Hamas is elected in Gaza in 2006. The Israelis blockade Gaza in 2007, which they still do today.
Not the way Egypt does, though.
No, Egypt is worse.
They control,
Because we block Israel.
right, the Rafah crossing is the only one in Egypt there. In 2014, the Israelis invade Gaza. Basically, in 2018, the Israelis say Israel is a Jewish country, and they're the ones in control. With Trump as president, he moves the capital of the United States from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
The embassy.
I'm sorry, what did I say? Capital?
The capital.
I'm sorry, the embassy.
It's always been the capital of Israel.
The embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. It makes the Israelis very happy. Abraham Accords in 2020, where there's an attempt to bring Arab nations to recognize Israel, and in some ways that's been moving along until last October. You probably didn't read about this because it didn't mean much, it didn't go anywhere. Again, they're trying to divide the areas up, it didn't go anywhere under Trump. There was settler violence constantly going on during this time, where the Israelis continue to push the Arabs out, the West Bank. In terms of international law, the Israeli settlements, right, whatever you think, right or wrong, are illegal because it's considered occupied territory. And just another quick example of how little things can cause big things. If you've ever been to an Arab country, when they call their people to prayer, there's a minaret, and they used to just have somebody calling. Now they use loudspeakers. Well, they were calling people to prayer, and the Israelis were having some sort of ceremony down below. And it's too loud, so soldiers went in and yanked the wires off on the speakers. So they went, I mean, here it's like, yeah, well, you got a problem. There it's a big deal. And, you end up with people getting rioting and so forth.
It's a very small area, so if you've ever been there, when you're in Jerusalem, and the mosques are being broadcasted, I mean,
Yeah.
it's all beautiful and
Yeah.
meaningful for each of the three major religions, but
Yep.
you can't do anything when it's being broadcast. And I think I'd also just quickly want to mention that the Gazans get all their money working in Israel.
Oh, yeah, a lot of them go in, yeah.
They work in Israel, they
Yeah.
get medical treatment in
Yeah.
Israel, everything is
Yeah.
happening over.
And it seems that the Israelis right now need workers because of the fact that they don't have those workers coming in anymore. They're
In 2005, it's also important to note that Israel pulled out of Gaza and gave
right.
Gaza self-control, and they voted for Hamas, who's never held another election.
Right.
They've
These are the
rejected.
two
All right, just this quickly, 2000.
And Israel and the US created Hamas. by the
Okay,
way.
well, just October 7th. Just my own.
What's that?
Just my own.
The United States
Wait a minute,
and
whoa.
Israel created and funded Hamas. The
Let-
Israeli government actually built the tunnels in Gaza, but anyway.
Let me finish this. Okay, then we'll talk. Almost done. Just October 7th, of course, and where we're going from that, we don't know. I personally, I don't like war. I'm against wars because wars cause suffering, and they don't have to happen usually. Just quickly show you, this is Israel. Israel.
I think until
Gaza.
both sides want peace, there will always be a war.
Gaza. Gaza. The issues go back 50 years, are still there. What happens to the Palestinian refugees? West Bank settlements of the Jews, status of Jerusalem, existence of Israel as a state, and whether Palestine, if the Palestinians should have a state or not. Those issues have been with us for decades. They're still with us today. This quote, and I'll end with this, I took out, I'm not sure where I got it, being a study of history, you're supposed to say who wrote it, I forgot, but it's such a great quote, I think, that I'm putting it up. And it's important because what the person is saying is if you allow issues to fester, as he says, you're going to always have trouble. You have to try to settle it. And I think whoever wrote this, he's shown that actually happens because we have October 7th. I'm done. Now, well, again, I'm not trying to convince you of any one way or the other. I'm just trying to just trying to give you the background to what happened. I mean, if you can argue that both sides have made huge mistakes, both sides are right, both sides are wrong in some way. My personal feeling, and I'll leave it up to you, is that you need to have somebody to bring people together. And I'm not sure it can be done now in particular, but my feeling is the only country that could do that is the United States. But
Well, I think that when people spend more time focusing on the differences than the similarities, they're already heading in the wrong
That's been
direction.
the
Yeah.
problem all along
Yeah.
for the last 100 years or more.
yeah.
But the
Talking
difference,
about
the
modern
difference, the
times rather
difference.
than ancient history or medieval history.
Is that, any thoughts or anything? You can feel free.
I think one of the things, so I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate you trying to bring it as a one objective, here's some facts. I guess the part that I have a little bit of a problem with is when you keep referring to it as Palestine, Israelis in Palestine, because it was Judea, and they
It
were
was Judea and Samaria.
Judea and Samaria, and it was the Jews who were pushed out repeatedly over and over and over, almost completely
That's why it's
annihilated,
called
and
Judea,
a small
because it
group
was
stayed
Jews.
there. A small group stayed there, and they kept going back, but you know your history, and your timeline is right there, but Palestine was were words that came up after the Greek, so that's how that started. And I think that's one of the misconceptions, especially for like the woke minds, the young people, who, you know, I think we should all be sympathetic and understand both sides, but when everybody is saying Palestine, when it was taken from Palestine, there were people there before it even became Palestine. So it looks like the Israelis, the Jews, and that's what this really comes down to, is the anti-Semitic aspect of Israel, that the Jews took the land from the Palestinians. That's the way it seems to be broadcast.
And it's not the way it really happened.
No. And that's a factual thing, that's not an
Exactly.
opinion.
Well,
Archaeological and scientific things that prove that, and old writings and manuscripts that
well,
Old
then,
Israeli coins.
well, then, you know, based on,
the Christian and Judaic and
yeah, but remember, the Wampanoag Indians were here before we were.
I completely agree. I
Yes.
have a problem with that. I don't,
Yeah, that is a serious problem. I have a friend
Well,
who
no,
works
but
very
the-
strongly with them.
But people don't,
that doesn't take away
the
from
modern,
this widespread thing that's going on right now.
you may, whatever you say, you may be right, but I'm just saying, take it easy.
Thank
You have, if you want to stop the killing, you've got to try to bring both sides. I think both sides have to give.
Both sides have to acknowledge each other's existence first and foremost.
And then
The people who now call themselves Palestinians, and they didn't call themselves that until sometime in the 1960s, because prior to that, when you were talking about Palestine, you were talking about what we call Israel and Jews. Because the old original flag of Palestine was a flag with the Magen David, which means the Star of David. But both sides need to acknowledge each other's existence. Certain Arab countries, including what was now called Palestine, refuse to even acknowledge that Israel exists. It doesn't exist in their textbooks, in their history books, or on their maps. How can you negotiate with someone that doesn't even acknowledge that you exist? Because they're not going to
Well,
acknowledge a contract with you if they don't believe
Well,
you
the
exist.
interesting thing is you notice that since '73, there's not been another war. And that's because the Arab countries, whether for whatever reason, they are beginning to acknowledge Israel. I mean, they were moving in that direction until October 7th, some like Saudi Arabia and so forth was, and now they're moving back away.
Like them or hate them,
The-
we had the
look at-
Abraham Accords.
You know very well that people have what they call hatred, love, whatever in their minds, that they have their eyes set on something. There's got to be a compromise if you want peace.
That's right.
And that means giving up certain things that you believe strongly about.
I think children shouldn't grow up thinking they're supposed to kill people.
I agree
When
with
you
you.
have children being taught, I mean, that's like, it's brainwashed. So how can there ever be peace if childhood is lost to hatred?
I think it's nationalism too.
There's,
But beyond nationalism, it's nationalism to the nth degree. Because a certain amount of nationalism is okay to try to get you and
Thank you.
people,
take it easy, thank you. Thank you.
like being Egyptian and having pride that your people did hieroglyphics.